Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room hummed with quiet tension, maps lit in a pale glow on the wall. Men leaned in, their voices low, sharp, decisive. Fingers traced lines across grids, rehearsing movements like chess masters anticipating an unseen opponent. The air smelled of stale coffee and metal polish, the scent of long nights and heavy silence. She sat at the far end, back straight, hands folded, eyes clear. No one met her gaze. When the colonel asked for suggestions, heads turned everywhere but toward her, as though she wasn't even in the room. It wasn't the first time. Her name was Captain Elena, Army intelligence officer, former pilot, a sniper when needed, a linguist when no one else could untangle a dialect. And yet here she was, muted in the one place where her voice mattered most. Not because she lacked answers. No, the truth was harder, sharper. They didn't trust her, or maybe they didn't want to. A woman who had been reassigned too many times, who carried scars too deep to ignore. Whispers of a failed op clung to her like smoke. No one asked her what really happened. No one cared to hear the part about the order she refused, the one that would have killed children on the ground. That silence had followed her here. But there was something else, something she hadn't told them, not yet. The colonel's voice cut through. Extraction window is narrow. 2 hours max before they close the border. We go dark after that. Men nodded, plans were confirmed. Elena's pulse quickened. They were missing something. A detail she'd seen, studied, traced in the patterns of intercepted chatter. A shift in timing, a coded phrase. It was all wrong. She opened her mouth, but a lieutenant's louder voice drowned her out. Laughter followed, quick and dismissive. She closed her lips again, her jaw tightening until it ached. Outside, dusk was pressing against the glass. The last streaks of sunlight bled into gray. Somewhere beyond that horizon, the mission was already waiting. And she knew, if no one listened, they would all walk straight into a trap. Later in the barracks, her hands moved on instinct, cleaning her rifle, sliding metal against cloth, the rhythm calming but merciless. Each sound sharp in the stillness, click, pull, release. The kind of ritual soldiers carried like a prayer. But her mind wasn't on the weapon. It was on the faces around that table, men she had flown beside, fought beside, men who still, after all this time, refused to hear her. She caught her own reflection in the rifle's steel, a flash of dark eyes, tired but unbroken, a woman too stubborn to quit. From across the room someone muttered, "Tor's still polishing ghosts." She didn't answer, didn't need to. She had learned long ago, silence could cut deeper than words. Yet beneath her calm something churned, a memory. A girl standing on a dirt airstrip years ago, watching her father's helicopter disappear into the haze. He had never returned, just a folded flag delivered by strangers. The military had taken him, and somehow it had taken her too. She had vowed then to never be just another silent face in the crowd. But here she was. And tomorrow they would either listen or die not listening. The convoy moved at dawn. Engines growled low, wheels crunching against gravel. The air was cold, the kind of chill that sank into bone, carrying the smell of wet earth. Elena rode in the last vehicle, pressed against the window, eyes scanning endless fields. Villages in the distance, smoke rising from cooking fires. Life carrying on, oblivious to the shadows moving through it. Her headset crackled, orders clipped and confident, voices trading banter, the kind soldiers used to hide nerves. But beneath it all, she felt the wrongness again. The chatter she'd intercepted before the mission hadn't been vague, it had been exact. The enemy wasn't where command thought they were waiting somewhere else, patient, watching. She whispered to herself, "It's a setup." Her stomach knotted. She needed to tell them. But she pictured the colonel's cold stare, the way the others leaned away from her at the table. She could hear the weight of silence pressing in again. And then gunfire cracked in the distance. The first explosion shook the ground. Dust burst against the windows. Tires screeched, men cursed. The convoy braked hard, engines growling as everyone reached for weapons. Contact left. Voices screamed in her headset, overlapping chaos. Elena's body moved before her mind caught up. She dropped low, rifle in hand, eyes cutting through the smoke and dust. The ambush wasn't random. It was orchestrated, precise, exactly as she'd feared. Through the haze she saw it, a ridge line that no one had accounted for, muzzle flashes, coordinated fire. They hadn't listened, and now they were paying for it. Pinned down, the soldiers huddled behind the thin protection of armored doors. Shouts echoed. A medic dragged a bleeding sergeant to cover. Elena crawled across gravel, her hands raw, her breath ragged. Bullets kicked dust inches from her face. She slammed her back against a wheel, exhaling hard. Beside her, a young private trembled, barely 20. His helmet tilted, his eyes wide with something he couldn't name. He whispered, "Ma'am, are we gonna make it?" His voice cracked, not bravado, not false courage, just raw human fear. Elena looked at him, really looked. He had freckles, a scar near his chin. He could have been her brother. He could have been anyone's brother. She steadied her breath, laid a hand on his shoulder. "We're not done yet." Her tone was steady, even as her chest pounded. She knew what had to be done. The ridge line was the key. The ambushers had elevation, cover, control. Unless someone got eyes on them and silenced them, no one was leaving alive. But who would go? Her name wouldn't be called, not after the silence of the briefing table. So she didn't wait for permission. She moved. Crawling, sprinting, sliding across dirt, she climbed toward the ridge while chaos roared behind her. Every muscle screamed. Every breath carried grit and ash. Gunfire stitched the earth near her boots. Shards of stone tore her palms. She pressed on, not for recognition, not for redemption, but because someone had to. At the crest, she dropped flat, heart hammering. Her rifle kissed her shoulder. She steadied her breath. Through her scope, the world narrowed. Enemy silhouettes, coordinated, focused, firing down on her people. She exhaled. One shot, clean. Another, silence where there had been fire. Her mind sharpened to nothing but rhythm. Squeeze, shift, breathe. One after another, the ridge line thinned. The balance tipped. Below, she heard it, her own side's voices shifting, orders regaining shape, confidence sliding back into chaos. And for the first time in hours, maybe years, she realized something. They would finally know. Not because she demanded it, not because she asked, but because when silence failed, her actions would not. How had she gotten there before anyone else? The colonel's voice snapped in Elena's headset, incredulous, angry, but laced with something he didn't want to admit: relief. From the ridge, the battlefield below had shifted. The ambush had cracked just enough. Suppressing fire slowed, bodies broke cover, and for the first time since the convoy was hit, survival didn't feel like an illusion. Elena's shots had carved silence where chaos had ruled. One after another, she cut the line thin. Not perfect, not enough to end it, but enough to tilt the ground beneath the enemy's feet. She slid back against stone, chest heaving. Her hands trembled, though not from fear, from memory. Her father's voice whispered in the back of her mind, "Never count the ones you hit, Lena. Count the ones you couldn't." And she remembered every single one. Her radio buzzed again. Who the hell gave Tor's clearance to move? No one answered, because no one had. She exhaled hard, tucked the radio close. She could hear the colonel's frustration through the static, could picture the sneer on his face, but his anger didn't matter. Not right now. What mattered was the boy below, the young private with freckles, firing blind from behind a half-burnt wheel. What mattered was the sergeant with blood pooling in the dirt. What mattered was that her people were dying. And she wasn't about to let them. The firefight dragged. Smoke thickened. Her ears rang with the constant shriek of rounds, the bark of return fire, the dull thump of grenades. She shifted position, adjusting angles, cutting gaps where she could. Minutes blurred into an eternity. The ridge gave her reach but also exposure. Twice, rounds shattered stone inches from her cheek, spraying her with grit. She clenched her teeth and pressed lower, heart hammering. When the firing finally slowed, it wasn't victory. It was exhaustion. The enemy melted into the tree line, fading as if swallowed by earth itself. Silence followed, not peace but a lull, the kind that promised more. Below, men moved in uneven patterns, dragging the wounded, checking ammo, counting what little they had left. Elena slid back down the slope, boots slipping on loose gravel, every muscle stiff. Her chest ached with the burn of adrenaline leaving too soon. When she reached the bottom, eyes turned, not with thanks, not yet, but with something else, a flicker of awareness. The young private she'd comforted before looked at her differently now, not like a ghost, not like someone invisible. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came. And then the colonel arrived. Captain Torres. His voice was iron. He loomed, jaw tight, eyes narrowing. Dust and sweat streaked his face, but authority clung to him like armor. You moved without orders. She stood straighter, meeting his gaze. If I hadn't, we'd all be dead. The words hung heavy. No one else spoke. The colonel's nostrils flared. For a moment, just a second, it looked like he might concede, but pride was a stubborn wall. You don't get to decide, not here, not ever. His tone cut sharp as shrapnel. You take orders, you don't give them. Her jaw tightened. 100 retorts pressed at her lips. None escaped. Because behind the colonel, she saw the wounded being carried. She saw the medics' bloodied hands. She saw men leaning against vehicles, drained and broken. This wasn't the moment to fight him. So she said nothing. Silence again, the curse that had always followed her. But the truth was there, unspoken, in every glance that flicked between them. They had survived because of her. And no one could erase that. That night the convoy camped on the edge of a ruined village. Burnt-out walls stood like broken teeth against the sky. The air was damp with ash and smoke, the kind of smell that sank into skin and refused to leave. A fire burned low, casting shadows across faces. Soldiers ate in silence, ration packs torn with tired hands. No laughter, no banter, just exhaustion, heavy and raw. Elena sat apart, her back against a crumbling wall. She chewed without taste, staring at the flicker of flame. A shadow fell over her. The young private, he crouched hesitant, holding his tin cup like a shield. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say thank you for earlier." His voice cracked on the last word. He looked younger than ever, lit by firelight. Elena studied him for a long moment. She saw the tremor in his hand, the way his eyes avoided hers, as though afraid of breaking some unspoken rule. "What's your name, Private?" "Davis, Matthew Davis." "Where you from, Davis?" He hesitated. "Montana, small town, horses, snow, you know, boring stuff." His voice softened, almost wistful. "My mom sends me letters every week. I don't always open them." Elena's chest tightened. She remembered unopened letters of her own, her father's handwriting fading with time. "Open the next one," she said quietly. Davis nodded, eyes flicking up to hers for just a second. Gratitude, not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind that stayed. He left her then, returning to the circle. She remained alone, staring at the fire until her vision blurred. Sleep never came. Instead, she walked the edges of the camp, boots crunching on loose stone, her rifle slung low. The night was cold, each breath a ghost in the dark. Her thoughts wouldn't quiet, not about the ambush, not about Davis, not even about the colonel's words. It was the silence at the briefing table that haunted her most. She thought of her mother, years ago, standing stiff at a memorial, clutching that folded flag like it was all she had left. How her mother never forgave the army for taking her husband. How Elena had joined anyway. Because if no one like me joined, then who would protect the ones left behind? But protection had a cost, and sometimes the very people you swore to protect refused to see you standing among them. The next morning, movement came early, orders clipped direct. The mission wasn't over. The convoy pressed on, deeper into terrain that twisted with uncertainty. But something shifted. When Elena entered the briefing circle at dawn, eyes didn't skip past her this time. They lingered, not long, not warm, but enough to mark a change. The colonel spoke of routes, of time frames, of risk. His words rolled steady, but underneath tension rippled. He didn't look at her, not once. Still, when silence stretched after his orders, it wasn't empty. It was expectant, as though someone, somewhere, waited for her voice. And for the first time in years, she thought, maybe they'll hear me. She waited, listened. The map spread before them showed a path too narrow, a valley that bent like a trap. She saw it instantly. Her chest tightened. If they followed that valley, they'd bleed again, maybe worse. She looked around. Soldiers shifted, uneasy. No one wanted to be the first to say it. So she cleared her throat. All eyes turned, and her heart pounded in her chest like a war drum. Why had the silence grown so heavy when she opened her mouth? Every soldier in that ruined village briefing circle had looked at her as if waiting, though none would admit it. The maps flickered under lantern light, the colonel's shadow stretching long across them. The valley marked in red ink yawned across the paper like a wound. Elena's throat was dry, but she spoke anyway. That route is wrong. The colonel's head lifted, eyes narrowing. The room went still. She continued, steady but quiet. Intercepted chatter mentioned a bend, a code phrase, the choke closes. They were talking about this valley. Her finger tapped the red mark. They're waiting there. It'll be another kill zone, worse than yesterday. The colonel's jaw flexed, and you know this how. I read every intercepted line, twice. I heard what no one else did. A pause, long, unforgiving. Finally, he leaned forward, voice low, cold. Funny, because last I checked, Captain, your record wasn't one of listening or following orders. The words hit like shrapnel, the whispers of her past failure dragged into daylight. Her chest tightened. She saw the memory unspool. A dirt road in another country years ago, civilians caught in the crossfire, the order to fire, her refusal, the explosion that followed, men dead, children screaming. It wasn't that she hadn't listened. It was that she had to the wrong person, to her own heart. But she said none of that now. Instead, she stared at the colonel and whispered, I'd rather you hate me and live than follow your pride and bury more of us. The silence that followed wasn't hers alone anymore. It spread. Soldiers shifted. Some looked at her, some at him, but none dismissed her, not after yesterday. The colonel's eyes burned into hers. Then he snapped the map shut. We move at first light. No agreement, no concession, just words sharp enough to slice the air. But he hadn't said through the valley. And that was enough. When dawn came, the convoy skirted wide, tracing broken roads and uneven ground. Progress slowed, but every soldier felt it. They had avoided something unseen, something that would have swallowed them whole. The colonel gave no credit, not aloud, but when his gaze swept the line of trucks, his eyes lingered on Elena a fraction longer than before. That was all she needed, not praise, just proof. By midday, the sky had turned. Clouds gathered, low and heavy, pressing down like weight on their shoulders. The air thickened with the taste of rain. Elena rode in the middle truck, window cracked, listening to the rhythm of engines. The private Davis sat across from her, helmet tilted back, eyes half closed in fatigue. You ever think, he murmured, about just leaving it all behind, walking away, disappearing? Elena blinked. The question was raw, unexpected. She thought of the quiet life she'd once imagined. A house near the ocean, books stacked on every table, mornings spent watching waves instead of war. A life where silence wasn't punishment but peace. Yes, she admitted softly. Davis smiled faintly, eyes still closed. So why don't you? Her gaze dropped to her hands, scarred and calloused. She thought of her father's folded flag, of her mother's tears, of the way her own reflection looked back at her in steel and glass. Because leaving does erase what you've already lost, she said. He opened one eye, studying her. And for once, he didn't look like a boy. He looked like someone who understood too much, too young. The truck jolted suddenly, engines revved, voices shouted from up front. Elena's instinct screamed. She grabbed her rifle. What is it? A driver's panicked voice crackled through comms. Roadblock, abandoned vehicles, no movement, feels wrong. The convoy braked hard, tires skidding against mud. Soldiers poured out, weapons raised, scanning. The scene ahead was eerie. Rusted cars burned at the edges, blocking the narrow road. Doors open, empty. Too empty. Elena's skin prickled. She stepped forward, boots sinking in the wet earth. The silence pressed against her ears like a scream. Something about the arrangement was wrong, too neat, too deliberate. Her eyes caught it, a wire faint, almost invisible, stretching between two cars. Her breath caught. IED, she shouted. But the word was too late. The explosion tore the world apart. Sound vanished first, just a roar swallowing everything. Then heat blinding, choking, the ground buckled. Smoke curled skyward, thick and black. Elena hit the dirt hard, her body thrown like a rag. Dust filled her mouth, her nose. She coughed, ears ringing, vision split into shards. Through the haze, screams, men calling for medics, metal groaning, fire crackling. She forced herself up, every bone aching. Around her, chaos bloomed. A truck lay on its side, wheels spinning uselessly. Flames licked at the wreckage. And in the middle of it all, Davis. Pinned beneath twisted steel, his face pale, lips moving but no sound escaping. Elena stumbled toward him, boots slipping in mud, ignoring the pain slicing through her ribs. She dropped to her knees beside him, hands clawing at the debris. "Stay with me, Davis," she gasped. "Stay with me." His eyes flickered to hers, wide, terrified, trusting. For a moment she saw herself reflected in them, not as the woman ignored, silenced, doubted, but as something else. The one voice he could hear. Her fingers bled against jagged metal as she pulled, heaved, shoved. Another soldier ran to help, and together they dragged the steel free. Davis gasped, chest rising, air finally filling him again. His hand clutched hers, trembling. "You're here," he whispered. Elena's throat burned, always. Hours later, when the fires dimmed and the wounded were counted, the colonel stood over the wreckage, silent. His face was carved from stone, unreadable. Elena approached, dirt streaked across her skin, blood drying on her hands. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because the colonel finally did. "You were right." 3 words flat, grudging but real. She didn't gloat, didn't smile. She just nodded once quietly as the weight of it settled between them. And when she turned away, her gaze lifted to the horizon. Dark clouds still gathered. The mission wasn't done. The road ahead twisted deeper into shadow. But for the first time, her silence no longer felt like defeat. It felt like strength. What she hadn't told them yet, though, what still burned in her chest, hidden, waiting, was that this mission wasn't just another line in her orders. It was personal. And the closer they moved to their target, the closer they came to the truth she had carried alone. A truth no one else was ready to hear. Why did the night feel heavier after fire? Smoke still lingered, a bitter veil across the broken road. The convoy had limped away from the blast site, battered and silent, every engine growl carrying the weight of the wounded. Now, at the edge of a valley clearing, they camped in half-darkness. Lanterns cast weak circles of light, pushing back a night that seemed determined to press in. Elena sat apart, her back against a splintered log. Her rifle lay across her lap, but she hadn't touched it in hours. Her hand still bore the cuts from dragging steel off Davis. Dried blood traced her knuckles. Every scrape stung, but it was nothing compared to the ache in her chest. She could still hear the explosion, the silence after, Davis's whisper, "You're here." She had told him always, a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. Around her, soldiers moved like ghosts, bandaged arms, limping steps, hollow stares. A medic crouched beside one man, whispering prayers as he stitched. Another sat with his head in his hands, rocking slowly. No one laughed. No one spoke loud. The colonel stood near the command truck, shoulders squared, posture unbroken, but his eyes gave him away. He scanned the perimeter too often. His jaw clenched with every gust of wind that rustled the grass. For the first time, Elena thought she saw it, not arrogance, fear. Later, when most had drifted into uneasy rest, she walked the camp's edge. The air was damp, thick with dew. Each step pressed soft earth, each breath visible in the cold. She paused near a ruined stone wall. Beyond it, the land stretched into shadow, hills rising like dark teeth. And there, in the silence, memory clawed its way back. A small village years ago. Mud walls, children running barefoot, laughter ringing in the air. She'd been there on leave for just one day, long enough to see faces, to share bread, to remember that war had edges where life still bloomed. Then the mission, the order, the refusal, the explosion. When the dust cleared, some of those same children lay still. Their mothers screamed. Her men cursed her name. Command buried her under reprimands, reassignment, silence. But in the ashes of that day, one truth had burned itself into her. She could not undo it, but she could not walk away either. And now this mission, this terrain, this enemy, she knew them too well, because hidden in the chatter and the names passed over radios, she had heard one she recognized. The man who had led that past ambush, the man whose shadow haunted her every dream. She hadn't told anyone, not yet, not the colonel, not Davis. Because she didn't know what she would do when she saw him again. A twig snapped. She spun, rifle raised. "Easy." Davis stood a few feet away, hands lifted. His face was pale in the moonlight, but calmer than before. "You move too quiet," she muttered, lowering her weapon. "Guess I learned from the best." His voice carried a shaky smile, then it faded. "Can't sleep." She studied him. He looked young again, too young for the things he'd already seen. His bandage peeked from under his uniform, stained at the edges. "You should rest," she said. "Every time I close my eyes, I hear it again," he whispered. "The blast, the screaming, I think maybe I shouldn't have come here." Elena's chest tightened. She remembered thinking the same once. "You came because you wanted to matter," she said softly. "Don't forget that. It's easy to get lost in fear, but fear doesn't erase why you chose to be here." He met her eyes, searching for something, maybe strength, maybe just someone to believe in. "Did you ever regret it?" he asked. Her breath caught, the truth balanced on a knife's edge. "Yes," she admitted, then quieter, "but regret doesn't mean you quit. It means you carry it and you try not to make the same mistake again." He nodded slowly, the words settling in him. For a moment he looked older, heavier, but steadier too. "Thanks, ma'am," he almost smiled, almost. When he walked back, she stayed in the shadows, staring at the hills. Her own words echoed in her head, "Don't make the same mistake again." But what if this time, the mistake was staying silent about the truth she carried? The night dragged. Hours crawled, marked by distant owls and the steady drip of dew from leaves. The men slept in restless fits. Elena dozed only once, a shallow slip into darkness, and the dream came instantly. She was back on that dirt road. The smoke, the screams, the colonel's face shouting but warped and distant, And beyond it all, one figure in shadow, turning, vanishing into the haze. The man whose name she had heard again in intercepted chatter. She woke with a jolt, heart hammering, breath ragged. Her hands trembled against her rifle. Somewhere in the camp Davis stirred. A medic coughed. The colonel shifted in his tent. But none of them knew what she carried. And dawn was coming fast. By morning, orders spread like cold water. They would push deeper, toward a village where intel suggested the target was moving supplies. The colonel briefed with clipped efficiency, his voice flat but unyielding. "We move hard, we move fast, we finish this." Elena stood in the circle, silent. No one dismissed her now, but no one asked her either. As men broke off to prepare, the colonel's eyes caught hers. Just for a second. The weight in his gaze wasn't anger anymore. It was something sharper, suspicion. She held his stare, unflinching. Neither spoke. But she knew, he could sense it, that she was carrying more than orders. And if the time came, she would have to decide whether to keep it buried or finally let the unheard voice speak its truth. The convoy moved again. Tires crushed mud, engines strained against hills. The weather broke, rain spitting in thin sheets. Visibility dropped, the world dissolving into gray. Elena pressed against the truck window, watching the blur of trees. Each drop of rain streaked like a tear across glass. In her chest, the storm raged louder. She had joined to serve, to protect, to honor her father's sacrifice. But beneath all that, hidden even from herself, was another reason. Redemption. And as the trucks rolled deeper into hostile ground, she felt the truth creeping closer. Her redemption had a name. And soon, the mission would bring her face to face with him. Rain fell in sheets, blurring the horizon, masking the road. Tires chewed mud, engines roared against the incline, and still the convoy pressed forward. By noon, the storm broke. Sunlight bled through clouds, turning wet earth to steam. The hills opened into a valley, and there, nestled in the green, lay the village. Small, quiet, unremarkable, but every man in the convoy felt the weight of it. Because quiet was never safe. The trucks halted at a ridge. Soldiers dismounted, boots sinking into slick ground, weapons up, eyes sharp. The colonel raised a hand, signaling silence. The only sound was the hiss of cooling engines. Elena stood apart, scanning rooftops, doorways, alleys. Her gut twisted. Something was wrong. Too still, too neat. No animals, no children. Villages never looked like this. Davis moved beside her, his grip tight on his rifle. "Feels empty." "It's not." Her voice was low, flat. He looked at her, frowning, but said nothing. He'd learned she spoke only when she knew. The colonel gave orders. 2 squads sweep north, 1 south. "Martinez," he caught himself, lips pressing thin, "you're with me." It wasn't trust. It was containment. He wanted her close where he could watch her. She fell in line anyway. The squad advanced down the slope. Boots sloshed mud, rifles cut arcs through the air. Every eye scanned shadows, waiting for the strike. They entered the first street, a row of mud walls, doors closed, windows shuttered. Rain dripped from rooftops. The smell of damp clay filled the air. "Clear left," a soldier whispered, slipping into a doorway. Another took right. Hand signals flickered like nervous birds. Elena's pulse hammered. Every sense screamed. Something in the silence pressed on her lungs. She slowed, listened. And there, faint beneath the drip of water, she heard it. The muffled scrape of boots, metal against stone, a breath held too long. She froze, lifted her hand. The colonel turned, eyes narrowing. "What?" "Down," she snapped. The street erupted. Gunfire shredded air, bullets tearing walls. Windows burst, spraying glass. Figures poured from alleys, rifles blazing. The squad dove for cover, mud exploding under impacts. The colonel slammed against a wall, cursing. Davis fell flat, firing bursts into smoke. Elena rolled behind a cart, shoulder slamming wood. Her return fire was steady, precise, cutting through muzzle flashes. But she didn't just shoot. She watched, measured, saw the angles. "To left," she called, voice slicing through chaos. A soldier pivoted just in time, dropping an enemy who had flanked. "Rooftop 3 o'clock," she barked. Davis turned, unleashed fire, and the gunman toppled. The colonel stole a glance at her. His men were alive because of her. Again. Still, no words came from him. The firefight raged, then stuttered, then broke. Smoke hung heavy. Bodies lay twisted in the mud. Silence returned, heavier than before. The soldiers regrouped, breath ragged. Bandages wrapped new wounds, ammo mags slapped home. Eyes darted to Elena, then away. Because she had been right, again. The colonel's jaw worked. He said nothing, but the silence around him was different now, less certain. He turned sharply. "We push deeper. They're trying to draw us off." No one argued. But Davis lingered near Elena. His voice was low, edged with awe. You knew before it started. Her gaze swept the rooftops, the shadows, the places where silence whispered too loud. "You just have to listen," she said. The village center loomed ahead, a wide square, a broken fountain in the middle. Soldiers fanned out, rifles sweeping. It was then she saw it. A flash, just a glimpse. A figure at the far end of the square, vanishing into an archway. Her heart stopped. The gait, the shoulders, the same outline burned into her nightmares. Him, the man she had chased across years of silence. Her hands trembled against her rifle. She wanted to run, to scream, to tell the colonel, but her throat locked. Because what if she was wrong? What if her ghosts were clouding the mission? And deeper, what if she wasn't wrong? They pressed into the square. Civilians emerged at last, cautious, fearful, eyes wide. Women clutching children, old men raising their hands. The colonel ordered them corralled, questioned. The medic passed out water. Soldiers fanned out, searching homes. Elena stood rigid, scanning the archway again and again. Empty now, silent. Davis noticed. "What is it?" She shook her head, couldn't say it, not yet. Her silence felt like betrayal, but her words might break everything. Hours dragged. The village gave up scraps of intel. Yes, men had passed through. Yes, weapons had been stored. No, no one would say more. But Elena knew. She had seen him. When dusk fell, the colonel gathered the squad. His voice was steel. "We hold here tonight. Tomorrow we move on." No protest rose. The men were spent. But Elena's chest burned. Tomorrow might be too late. As night cloaked the village, she sat in the corner of a mud-walled house, rifle across her knees. Rain drummed the roof. Davis slept fitfully nearby, muttering in dreams. She closed her eyes, but rest never came. Because she knew the truth. He was here. And before dawn, she would have to choose. Stay silent and obey, or speak, and risk shattering the fragile trust she had barely begun to earn. Why was the night so quiet? The village slept in uneasy silence. Rain tapped roofs, gutters overflowed, and in the square, lanterns hissed faintly against the damp. Soldiers rotated watch, boots splashing in the mud, rifles slung but ready. Inside one of the larger mud-brick homes, the squad gathered around dim lamps, armor unbuckled, steam rising from their fatigues. Elena sat against the far wall, rifle across her knees, gaze fixed on the narrow window slit. She hadn't closed her eyes once. Couldn't. Every creak, every whisper of wind carried weight. Because she knew he was near. The man she'd chased across shadows. The man whose orders had destroyed not just villages, but her. She told no one, not yet. But silence carried its own price. The colonel entered, dripping from the rain, helmet under his arm. His face was carved with lines of fatigue, but his eyes burned sharp. He scanned his squad, then lingered on her. She didn't flinch. "We move at first light," he said. His voice filled the room, heavy, commanding. "Intel points to a weapons route cutting east. We follow it." A murmur of assent rippled among the men. Some already lay on mats, too tired to care. Others cleaned rifles, checked magazines. Davis leaned against the wall, silent, watching Elena with something close to worry. But then the colonel's voice shifted, low and cutting. "And before dawn, Martinez and I are going to talk." The room stilled. Soldiers looked up uneasy. No one spoke. Elena's chest tightened, but she gave no sign. She only nodded once, as if agreeing to a fate already known. The colonel left it at that. An hour passed. Rain eased, thunder rolling far off. The squad settled into sleep, scattered across the room, rifles within reach. Davis was last to drift, muttering, "Wake me if," and then silence. Only Elena remained awake. She breathed steady, heart hammering, listening. The village seemed calm, but calm was never truth. And then she heard it. A click, a scrape, the shuffle of too many feet in the mud. Her eyes snapped to the window slit. Shadows moved, not villagers, armed men, silent, surrounding. She didn't hesitate. "Up," she hissed, standing fast. The colonel's eyes shot open instantly, like he'd never slept. Davis jerked awake, fumbling for his rifle. Others cursed, disoriented. The first shots shattered the night. Gunfire raked the house, mud walls spitting dust. Windows shattered, glass spraying the floor. Shouts erupted outside. "Ambush!" Davis roared, diving for cover. Soldiers scrambled, dragging rifles into hands, snapping into firing positions. The colonel was already on his feet, barking orders, voice like steel through chaos. But Elena was ahead of them. She rolled to the window, rifle cracking. 3 muzzle flashes winked out in the dark. She pivoted, dropped another shadow, slipping through the square. Her voice cut clean. "South side heavy, they're pressing." The colonel gave the order a beat later, but men were already moving because she had seen it first. And for the first time, no one hesitated at her command. The night became fire. Bullets screamed, grenades burst against mud walls, the square filled with chaos. Soldiers fought in every direction, mud splattering, smoke choking the air. Elena fired, shifted, reloaded, fired again. Her shoulder burned, her throat raw from shouting warnings. She moved like a machine, but inside her chest was a storm. Because every shadow could be him. And then she saw him. Through smoke across the square, brief, a profile lit by muzzle flash, the scarred jawline, the stride that haunted her memory. Him. Her body froze. He turned, lifted a rifle. She fired first. The shot cracked air. The figure staggered but fell behind others, dragged into the chaos. Alive or dead, she couldn't see, couldn't know. Her hands shook, heart tearing her ribs apart. And still she fought. Minutes stretched like hours. Soldiers bled, cried out, pressed tourniquets with shaking hands. Davis went down once, grazed, teeth clenched as Elena dragged him behind cover. His gratitude was a grunt through pain. The colonel never left the center, shouting, firing, pulling wounded back with bare strength. His commands kept the unit alive. But even he knew, without her calls, without her warnings, they would have been overrun. And when at last the gunfire thinned, when shadows broke and fled into the hills, when silence returned heavy as a shroud, it was Elena who was still standing, rifle steady, scanning dark. The squad slumped, exhausted, drenched in sweat and blood. The colonel looked at her, really looked. And for the first time there was no dismissal in his eyes, only a question. They buried 2 soldiers at dawn, simple graves in wet earth, rifles planted upright, helmets resting on top. The squad stood in rain-slick silence, faces hollow. Elena stood apart, hands clasped, head bowed. Guilt gnawed at her. If she had spoken sooner, if she had warned them of who was here. The colonel broke the silence. "Martinez." Her head lifted slowly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't scorn, he simply asked, "What aren't you telling me?" The question cracked her more than shouting ever could, because she had no answer that wouldn't shatter everything. Her throat closed. The squad watched her, silent, waiting. Even Davis, bruised and bandaged, stared with unblinking eyes. She swallowed, words trembled on her lips. But nothing came. Her silence spoke louder than truth. The colonel stepped closer, eyes hard. "You've saved us twice, but if you're holding something back." He let the sentence hang. The squad's gaze burned into her. Trust, doubt, fear, all of it in their silence. And she knew the next step wasn't about the mission. It was about her. Because secrets could kill more than bullets. How long could silence hold before it broke? The graves were still fresh. Mud clung to boots, helmets dripped with rain, rifles still smelled of smoke. The squad had not spoken much since the ambush. Their eyes carried it instead: suspicion, grief, unasked questions. And Elena felt every gaze. She had fought beside them, bled in the same mud, shouted warnings that kept them breathing. But she had also held back. A truth, a name, a ghost. And ghosts, left unspoken, always haunted. The colonel called her aside as the squad packed gear. His voice was low, deliberate, carrying more weight than any order. "Walk with me." They stepped through the village, past shuttered windows and wary civilians. Rain had thinned to mist, dampening her hair, blurring the edges of the world. The colonel's boots struck mud in measured rhythm. Finally, he stopped beneath a half-collapsed archway away from the others. His eyes were steel, his face drawn. "You saw someone." Her chest tightened. She opened her mouth, closed it. He leaned in. "Who?" The word cut her like a blade. She swallowed, throat raw. "A face from before." His silence demanded more. Her breath shook. "The man who destroyed my unit. Years ago, I thought he was dead. I was told he was dead." Her voice broke. "But he's here." The colonel's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching. He studied her, measuring, weighing. "You're certain?" Her eyes lifted to his. "I don't forget." Silence stretched. At last he exhaled. "And you kept this from me, from us." She couldn't answer, couldn't defend. Her silence was her answer. When they returned, the squad felt the shift. The colonel didn't announce it. He didn't have to. His silence, her silence, it filled the air. Davis was the first to speak, voice rough. "What's going on?" Elena's hands tightened on her rifle. She couldn't meet his eyes. But the colonel did. She saw someone, a target, a ghost from her past. The squad froze. Murmurs cut through the air. A target, a ghost. What did it mean? Elena finally forced herself to speak, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "He commanded the cell that ambushed my team. Years ago, everyone died but me. I tracked him for months. Then the trail went cold. Command told me he was gone, but he's not. He's here." Silence fell heavy. Davis's jaw tightened. "And you didn't tell us." Her eyes flicked to him, pain raw. "I wasn't sure. I couldn't risk being wrong." "Couldn't risk?" His voice cracked, rising. "Two men are in the ground because of last night. You knew something and said nothing." She flinched but didn't break. Another soldier spat into the mud. "We can't trust her." The words landed like a blow. The squad's weight shifted, doubt in their eyes, distance. The colonel didn't stop them. He let the fracture open, as if testing its edges. And Elena stood in the middle of it, exposed, stripped bare. Her silence had protected her. Now it condemned her. That night the squad camped in silence. No laughter, no muttered jokes, no easy curses. Just the scrape of gear, the crackle of a small fire, the rain whispering beyond. Elena sat apart, back against stone, rifle across her lap. She stared into the flames, feeling the heat on her face, the cold in her chest. Davis passed her once, bandaged shoulder stiff. He paused as if wanting to speak, then walked on. That hurt more than his anger. She closed her eyes, and for the first time since the mission began, tears burned hot. Not because of danger, not because of ghosts, because she had lost the only fragile thread of trust she had begun to weave. But in the darkest hour before dawn, when most of the squad had drifted into uneasy sleep, she heard it. Voices, low, muffled outside the perimeter. She froze, listening, crept to the edge of camp, rifle steady, eyes narrowing into dark. Shadows moved at the tree line, figures too many. Her pulse spiked. They weren't retreating, they were regrouping. And this time they wouldn't strike the walls of a house, they would strike the camp. Her silence was over. Elena. She turned. Davis stood behind her, rifle in hand, eyes searching hers. She didn't hesitate. They're coming again. He held her gaze. For a beat he said nothing, then he nodded. I'll wake them. The colonel roused the squad fast, voice cutting through the night. Rifles snapped into hands, helmets buckled, boots slammed mud. No hesitation this time. And no one doubted her warning. They set positions, eyes sharp, breath steady. The air crackled with tension, rain dripping from branches. Then the forest erupted. Gunfire tore from the dark, tracer rounds slashing the night. Shouts rose, shadows charged. The squad returned fire, a wall of noise and flame. Elena's rifle barked in measured bursts, each shot deliberate, carving through the rush. Her calls guided them again, snapping men to blind spots, saving lives with every warning. And this time, no one ignored her. The colonel shouted orders, Davis covered flanks, but voices carried her directions as well. Soldiers relayed her warnings, trusted her eyes. The silence had shifted. She was no longer unheard. The firefight dragged long into the night. Explosions rocked the tree line, smoke burned throats, men cried out in pain, but the line held. When dawn broke pale and gray, the forest floor was littered with bodies. The survivors fled into mist, leaving silence behind. The squad stood, ragged, bloodied, but alive. Because of her. The colonel's voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. Pack up, we move. But his eyes lingered on her longer than before. And though he said nothing more, something had changed. Not full trust, not yet. But no one looked past her now. That night as they trudged east toward the ridge, Davis finally walked beside her. His voice was quiet, stripped of anger. That man you saw, if he's the one who took your team, why didn't you tell us sooner? She looked at him, the weight of years pressing against her ribs. Because I wanted to kill him myself. The words were raw, almost shameful. Davis studied her, and now. Her breath caught. The rage inside her twisted with something else, exhaustion, grief, the faintest thread of hope. Now, she whispered, I just want this to end. They walked in silence after that, but it was not the same silence as before. This one carried weight, and something like understanding. How does a mission end when the ghosts you chase are older than the war itself? The squad moved at dawn, boots striking wet stone, breath fogging in cold air. Their faces were hollow, eyes sunken from too many sleepless nights. The forest thinned, giving way to rocky slopes and jagged ridges. Somewhere beyond those ridges their target moved, supplies, routes, commanders. And him. Elena could feel it, as if the earth itself hummed with his presence. The colonel marched at the front, silent, jaw tight. Davis stayed close to her flank, no longer avoiding her. The others glanced her way now and then, but their eyes were different, wary still, but no longer blind. Her voice had been heard, but hearing wasn't the same as trusting. That would come or it wouldn't. Either way, the mission pressed on. By midday, they reached the gorge. A narrow cut in the earth, rocks sharp, a river roaring below. A wooden bridge stretched across, slick with rain, ropes creaking in the wind. The colonel raised a hand. The squad fanned out, scanning both ridges. Elena's heart hammered. Because there, across the gorge, half-shadowed in the rocks, stood a figure, watching, waiting. Her breath caught. Him. Even at a distance she knew, the scar, the stance, the weight in her chest told her what her eyes already knew. Her hands trembled around her rifle. The colonel followed her gaze, his eyes narrowed. Target. Her throat closed, then opened on a whisper. Yes. The words seemed to echo, carried away by the wind. Gunfire erupted before the echo died. Bullets cracked against stone, shattering rock. The squad dove for cover, rifles returning fire. Shadows poured from the ridge, fighters, dozens, taking positions, laying down heavy bursts. The bridge shook with impacts. Ropes frayed, boards splintered. Pinned exposed. The colonel barked orders, Davis called angles. Soldiers fired until barrels smoked. But the ridge was alive with muzzle flashes. They couldn't hold here. Unless someone moved. Elena's eyes locked on the far side. On him, on the man who had once taken everything. The gorge roared below, water smashing rocks like thunder. The bridge groaned, ropes snapping one by one. No time, no choice. She rose from cover. I'll cross. The colonel snapped his head around. You'll what? Her voice was iron. I can get through. You'll never. But she was already moving. Bullets screamed past her as she sprinted onto the bridge. Wood cracked beneath her boots, ropes twisting, wind howling. She fired in bursts as she ran, each shot precise, clearing shadows that leaned too close to the edge. Her chest burned, lungs tearing. The gorge blurred below, a void waiting to swallow her whole. But her eyes never left him. The man at the far side. He watched her come, calm, almost patient, as if he had known she would. Her boots slammed the last board. She dove behind rock, chest heaving. And then silence. He stepped forward, the scar across his jaw, the cold in his eyes. Elena Martinez. His voice was low, almost amused, still alive. Her rifle snapped up, not for long. He didn't flinch. You've chased me a long time, tell me, what did it cost? Her breath shook, everything. And still you follow. She steadied the rifle. I'm here to end it. He tilted his head like a teacher correcting a student. No, you're here because you can't live without me. The words cut deep, because some part of her knew her life had bent around his shadow, years defined by a single absence, a single ghost. Her finger tightened on the trigger. But she hesitated. Because killing him wouldn't bring back her team, wouldn't give her back the years of silence, wouldn't quiet the guilt. What would it change? Behind her the firefight raged. The squad pinned, the colonel's voice raw, Davis shouting. She realized then, this wasn't just about her. It never had been. Her voice was steady, louder than the storm. You're wrong. His brow furrowed. I don't need you, she said, not anymore. Her shot cracked like thunder. He staggered back, shock flashing across his face, then dropped against the rock lifeless. The silence that followed was different, not heavy, not haunted. Free. She turned, fired into the ridge, cutting through fighters. Her calls rang out precise, clear. Left flank down, push now. The squad surged across the bridge, Davis leading, the colonel close behind. Soldiers moved with her words, clearing angles, pressing the enemy back. Within minutes, the ridge was theirs. Fighters fled, leaving bodies scattered across the rocks. The gorge roared below, but the world above was still. And for the first time, the squad looked at her not as an outsider, not as a voice to ignore, but as one of their own. By dusk, the ridge was quiet. Fires burned low, rifles rested on knees. Bandages wrapped wounds, water bottles passed hand to hand. The colonel sat apart, eyes on the horizon. Finally, he spoke. You did what I couldn't, you saw what I refused to, and you carried it alone. Elena met his gaze. Carrying it almost killed us all. A long silence, then he nodded. No more silence then. It wasn't apology, It wasn't praise. But it was enough. Later, Davis sat beside her, arms on his knees, watching the last light fade. His voice was soft. So, it's over. She thought of the man's face, of years spent chasing a ghost. She thought of her team, gone but not forgotten. And for the first time in years, the answer came quiet. Yes. They sat in silence after that. But it was no longer the silence of dismissal or grief or ghosts. It was the silence of rest. When dawn rose again, painting the ridges in gold, the squad moved on. Their mission wasn't finished. Wars never ended clean. But something in her had ended. Or begun. She walked among them, no longer apart, no longer unheard. Because sometimes dignity doesn't shout. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it endures. And when the moment comes, it doesn't speak. It simply acts.